Good evening. We begin tonight with a stunningly simple fact. The former president of the United States has just loudly and proudly confessed to the very thing the House Select Committee is hard at work trying to prove. He has also just dangled pardons in front of the people who attacked the Capitol and leveled veiled threats, hinting at potential mob violence at those who would investigate or prosecute him. Yet that fact that he did all that in just a single weekend, shocking as it is, also comes with a depressingly familiar corollary. It has always been this way. He has always said the quiet part out loud, whether after the fact or before or both. He is, consciously or not, a serial confessor. And yesterday in a statement, he did it again. The once and perhaps future president of the United States said this about former Vice President Mike Pence, quote, "He could have overturned the election." Now that's as clear a statement as you can find of his intent to remain in office by nullifying the results of a free and fair election. He's even using the language overturn the election, which is the very thing the January 6th committee is trying to prove. Now that statement, if that's what it's called, essentially admitting he attempted to stage a coup, follows remarks in Texas where he said this about members of the violent mob who took part in that very attempt. And is now in jail awaiting trial, charged with destroying property, assaulting police officers, weapons possessions, and even conspiring, in the words of the criminal statute, to overthrow, put out, or to destroy by force the government in the United States.
If I run and if I win, we will treat those people from January 6th fairly. We will treat them fairly. And if it requires pardons, we will give them pardons because they are being treated so unfairly.
So unfairly, he said. That is a former president dangling pardons in front of alleged felons, some of whom might be called on one day to testify against him. Yet, again, shouldn't be that surprising. He's done it openly before and paid no price for it. Back in 2018, when he refused to rule out pardoning his corrupt former campaign advisor, Paul Manafort.
I think the whole Manafort trial is very sad when you look at what's going on there. I think it's a very sad day for our country. He worked for me for a very short period of time, but you know what? He happens to be a very good person. And I think it's very sad what they've done to Paul Manafort.
He would, of course, go on to pardon Paul Manafort and Roger Stone, neither of whom, in his words, or Tony Soprano's, ever flipped on him. So what he said on Saturday shouldn't be surprising. The behavior and intent were out in the open years before, as was, going back to his first campaign, his intention to let a foreign power hack American computers and tamper with American democracy.
Russia, if you're listening, I hope you're able to find the 30,000 emails that are missing. I think you will probably be rewarded mightily by our press.
Well, 5 hours later, according to the Mueller report, the Russian hacking began. His subsequent explanation to the special counsel's team was that it was a joke, quote, as was apparent to any objective observer. Now, you would think this was perhaps his first lesson in how easy it would be for him to say the quiet part out loud and not face any consequences, except in truth it wasn't. 6 months earlier, in what was, for him at least, a surprisingly self-aware and maybe meta observation, he said this.
I could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and I wouldn't lose any voters, okay?
Now, in this case, thank goodness he was speaking figuratively, which of course later gave rise to his handlers and enablers telling us, oh, we should take the man seriously, not literally. Except, as it would happen, the best way to predict what he would do or how he felt about something or explain it after the fact would be to take what he said literally. Want to know if he had a soft spot for white nationalists? Take him literally.
You had some very bad people in that group, but you also had people that were very fine people on both sides.
Now, to remind you, this was one of the two sides he was talking about, white nationalists chanting Jews will not replace us and the Nazi slogan blood and soil. And you didn't need to read behind or between the lines to see where his sympathies lay. You just needed to take his words at face value. And if there were any doubt at the time about his affinity for thugs, you could take what he said in March of 2019 at face value when he boasted about the bikers who supported him, saying, quote, I have the tough people, but they don't play it tough until they go to a certain point, and then it would be very bad, very bad. Nobody took that seriously enough at the time, nor did many take these remarks in front of tens of millions of debate viewers seriously enough or see them as the foreshadowing they were of January 6th.
Who would you like me to condemn?
White supremacists and right Proud
Boys, stand back and stand by.
Again, there they are. Words that the former president's enablers did not take either seriously or literally, even though the Proud Boys certainly seemed to. And again, they too were part of a pattern dating back to then-candidate Trump refusing to denounce former KKK leader David Duke when pressed repeatedly on it by CNN's Jake Tapper. He subsequently blamed it on a bad earpiece, but it would foreshadow his reluctance, of course, to condemn the haters in Charlottesville. Senator Marco Rubio, his primary opponent at the time, did condemn him for that, but then, of course, went on to become one of his staunch supporters and enablers. That was nearly 6 years ago. Countless indictments of associates ago, 2 impeachments and 1 insurrection ago, and so very much of it was openly telegraphed or openly admitted to after the fact. And even now, even someone who voted to convict him in his second impeachment and who condemns his pledge to pardon January 6 criminals still cannot completely rule out supporting him in 2024.
Well, we're a long ways from 2024, but let me say this. I do not think President Trump should have made that pledge to do pardons. We should let the judicial process proceed.
You say we're
January
a long way away
6th
from
was a dark day in our history.
And it was, and you voted to convict President Trump as well. Why can't you rule out supporting him in 2024?
Well, certainly it's not likely, given the many other qualified candidates that we have that have expressed interest in running. So it's very unlikely.
So she voted to convict him in proceedings where a conviction would have barred him from ever holding office again, which she was comfortable with when she voted to convict him. Yet somehow, now, she can't simply say out loud what she said with her vote just a year ago. A year that hardly saw the former president mellow, just the opposite. No, her remarks came just a day after he openly tried to make martyrs and heroes out of the mob that terrorized her own workplace and threatened to hang the man presiding over it. And it's not like that threat is receding. Here's what the man she still might support also said on Saturday about the public servants, sworn officers of the court, who are investigating him.
It really is prosecutorial misconduct at the highest level. These prosecutors are vicious, horrible people. They're racists, and they're very sick. They're mentally sick. If these radical, vicious, racist prosecutors do anything wrong or illegal, I hope we are going to have in this country the biggest protest we have ever had in Washington, D.C., in New York, in Atlanta, and elsewhere, because our country and our elections are corrupt.
So just take a step back when you hear him say that at the end. That's a former president of the United States, just in a sentence saying our country and our elections are corrupt. The former president of the United States is saying our country is corrupt, our elections are corrupt. Nobody blinks an eye. I mean, can you imagine for a moment if any other president or former president said those words in previous years? There'd be outrage. The president's words encouraging mobs to rally against public servants prompted Atlanta Area District Attorney Fani Willis to ask the FBI for help in providing security for buildings and staff for security assistance. She's investigating the former president's effort to overturn results in Georgia. She's doing her job. Whether it comes to the threat he might pose to her office or democracy, she is taking his words and deeds at face value. Others, sadly, still not so much.